So, have you ever worked on a large design project? You know, the type where there's a lot of people involved and it could be a quite challenge, but more so when you have to deal with specific and difficult situations where you find yourself and the rest of the team going in circles, and every progress that you make, you have to go back to the drawing board, and it feels like the project just doesn't get anywhere and the team gets exhausted to the point of burnout. Let's have a talk about this. I don't know if you can relate to this, but there are these difficult situations that I had to face myself. Like whenever you're half through designing an app and you get that last minute change or constant and never ending changes that affect the project's direction, and then they risk the deadline. Like there's also these situations where you realize that there are misalignments within the purpose or the goals of the project, or whenever the stakeholders do not come to a consensus or agreement on the final goal. Also, whenever the requirements of the project conflict directly with a good user experience and you're torn inside, between practicing good UX and following the wrong directions because you got told to do that and you just want to get the job done. And the list can go on and on and on. Like, this is real. This is beyond having to deal with components in Figma and pushing pixels. We're talking about project management, working with other team members and stakeholders, and I'm gonna dare say politics. All of this concerning you as the UX designer for that large project, and I wanna help you adopt the right mindset. What does it take to navigate through all this? I want to give you clarity and equip you with the tools so that you can have and be an effective facilitator to everyone in your team. But before diving into each one of these three situations, one of the critical things to remember when working on a large design project, it's the importance of clear communication within your team and your stakeholders. And I'm going to tell you why in a little bit. Let's jump into the first scenario where you have clear communication between your team and your stakeholders, and it's getting so clear that you're being told that there are changes in the direction of the project. Now, this is normal. As project evolves, you get more clarity and you receive practical feedback on your designs. But the problem occurs when you're halfway through and you get hit with that constant change. When design presentations turn into requirement gathering sessions, you're no longer on that continuous path. Instead, meetings, they become a place where you leave more confused because you got hit with making a U-turn or going backwards on a specific feature. Like, for example, when you're working very hard on a specific feature that might require, 3 screens and multiple states, and all of a sudden you were told that it is no longer needed because of XYZ reason, whatever the reason is, and there could be valid reasons why. So then a week later, you get asked to continue because the feature that was not important last week, it's now critical, and it's time to continue what you thought was canceled. Or you might get an additional feature that needs a design that wasn't part of the original plan. Well, you get the point. As a UX designer, how do you deal with these constant changes? Here's how I learned how to deal with this. Now, remember when I said that it's crucial to establish clear communication channels within those involved within the project? This is so that you can make sure that any changes within the project direction are identified and talked about early on to help minimize the impact of changes on the overall project schedule and the budget. In most successful teams, there's a project manager, a product owner. These are the people that are doing all the note taking. They're tracking down who's doing what, who said what, at what date. They have these follow-up actions that need to be taken. They track this either through a spreadsheet, Confluence, Pages, or even through email threads. But what if you're alone and you have no project manager for this, this is where your design thinking mind should kick in as a problem solver to ask the following questions. How can I facilitate these conversations? How can I make the conversation experience easier for all of us involved within this project? Why are the requirements constantly changing? Can I help to solve for this? Absolutely. You're empowered to do so. As a UX designer, you have the superpower to influence and facilitate the things for your fellow teammates. You can lead by example. So I had this situation like this where, with the guidance and help from my Scrum Master, we created a task tracker spreadsheet with all the tasks listed that would make up the entire scope of the project. And we listed every screen, every component that needed to be designed. And each item, we had these rows with each item in it. And what they had on each column was the Jira ticket number, the task title and short description. We had a field for, do we have the requirements clear? A requirement sheet. Who will design it? Who's the designer that's going to work on this? When is the due date? Do I have a specific due date for that task? Also, what is the working status of that task? Is it under to do? Is it in progress? Is it done? What is the accepted status? If it's not ready for review, or is it in review? Does it need a revision? Is it approved? These are all different statuses of a specific task. And we also added an area for adding additional notes. We would have even a requirements document for each task just to make sure that we have clarity and all the details are written. So now this spreadsheet, or what some refer to as a smart document, this would become the tool that's going to help facilitate the conversations moving forward, and by sharing it on the screen during Zoom meetings. Because not only will this help to follow where we are, what's been done, and what needs to be done, but it also helps to point out where we have any holes within the requirements. Do we have clarity on the requirements for each task? And most importantly, are the requirements changing? And if so, did we capture the new changes and talk about how these new changes will affect the additional days that are going to push out that deadline target, and how much extra effort we need in order to make those new changes? You see where I'm going with this? With this new approach, we can now point out the risk or the pain points of continuous changes to help avoid having the project take longer than it needs to. Now, I'm not suggesting that changes are a terrible thing. As a UX designer, it is essential that you maintain flexibility and willingness to adapt, to the changes throughout the project, and make sure that the final product meets the needs of the stakeholders. As long as somebody is documenting and ensuring that changes are being tracked during the design process, and that the decisions made along the way are understood by everyone in the team. This is one of those activities that you can have at your disposal at any time that you can, that's going to help you communicate clearly. All right, now let's jump into that second scenario. Now, what happens if you're in a situation where multiple stakeholders do not come to a consensus on a certain part of the project? Where they cannot agree on requirements, and you're right in the middle of it, and you're asking yourself, what should I do? In your mind, you're asking, should I suggest something? And if I do, is it going to cause further disagreements? In these situations where two or more folks do not come to a consensus, it can be quite a challenge to continue to drive the project forward. But you can take a step back and ask yourself again, how can I assist and facilitate this situation? At that moment, that's when you need to step into your mindset, that UX mindset, and become that facilitator. It is your UX superpower. This is what you do. You simplify things, you facilitate for others, and you can encourage open communication that will help identify the root cause of whatever the disagreement is. You can always shift the conversation to having everyone review the requirements document. This is so that everybody can be on the same page and to help identify the core requirements that must be met for the project to be successful. And by narrowing down the focus, you're helping everyone find common ground. And you can also do this by asking questions for clarity. Oh, and also, if you have any data that can help support any requirement decisions, that could be huge help. But sometimes we might not even have any user research or usability test results at hand. You may be at the beginning stages of a product creation cycle. So this is when you may need to rely on the only information that you know that is best practice in the UX field. And you can communicate this because this is your territory of what you study, what you practice. Another thing that you can do is to help stakeholders to prioritize what the requirements based on their importance on the project and what the user needs. Again, having the requirements listed from the most important at the top to the least important at the bottom can help identify which requirements are non-negotiable and which can be compromised. Then you may suggest that a least important requirement can be part of a post MVP. Just in case you're not familiar with the term MVP, I'll tell you later. The main idea here is that you look for win-win situations. Whichever way you can help the stakeholder look for solutions that meet the needs of all the parties involved. This is where you may end up with trade-offs and compromises, but it can lead to a solution that everyone can support to reach a consensus, and a final decision can finally be made. So now you may find this very insightful and helpful, or it reminds you of specific situations that you've had in the past. Please share your experience with me in the comments down there. So now you have everyone on the same page, a consensus has been met. And now you may be asking,
but Enoch, what happens when those project requirements directly conflict with a great user experience?
Yes, this is the third scenario that I want to talk about. Let's say that the consensus was met, but that consensus or the agreement or solution, it was to bombard the user with a bunch of pop-ups, layovers, ad placements on a page because that's where the stakeholders find high value and that's where they make the most revenue. Yeah. But in UX, we know for a fact that based on proven facts and stats, that 50% of visitors abandon a website in less than 3 seconds because they're being presented with ads that are being forced down their throats, or maybe the web page took more than 3 seconds to load because the number of objects that are requested by the page load. It may sound like I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but this is true. You get the point. You're being asked to design for the contrary of a good user experience. So how do we navigate through this situation? How do I deal with this? Again, going back to the fundamental of communication, it is your job, your duty to advocate for the user. The users, they don't have a voice in these meetings. Their voice, you are their voice as the UX designer. So you need to communicate the importance of user experience. You want to ensure to the stakeholders that they understand how important this is, especially how it impacts the project's success. You can always share data or examples of improving user satisfaction if you do XYZ with a different approach. You could always propose an alternative solution that still aligns with the original requirements or the goals. For example, I don't know, if you're displaying ads and that is what you need to do to hit the revenue goal, Like, sure, let's keep them, but first, let's engage the user to our website content, and then maybe further down the page, we can introduce non-intrusive ads or banners. Let's avoid the automatic pop-up and replace them with, I don't know, like a media card element that behaves similar to the components that are already on the page. Like if the user is already consuming that, let's add another one of those cards, and then that could be an ad. You know, it's smoother that way. It's a better user experience. But your goal is for you to find that balance and the solutions that meet the requirements and the user experience that is prioritized by the user needs. So if you can identify the most critical user needs, communicate them, and prioritize them in the design process, then you have a better chance of conveying to everyone that the most critical user needs must be met, even if it's some requirements that need to be sacrificed. Suppose that you still find yourself in conflict and you don't get the support you expected. Now, in that case, your next move is to encourage testing and validating of, getting that validation of the design with real users to gather feedback and validate that the design solutions that you previously suggested, they're meeting the needs of the users. This is going to help build support for your designs and make it more difficult for the stakeholders to argue against it. If you involve them in this validation process, even better, because now your approach should always be collaborative, facilitate and work together as a team, working together to find a compromise that addresses the requirements while providing a good user experience. Now, sometimes this may involve making trade-offs, but it can help to ensure that the final product has a solid and successful design plan for both the users and the stakeholders. All right, so there you have it. By following these tips, you can navigate through the challenges of working on large design projects and ensure that the final product is a success for everyone, all the stakeholders, your teammates, product owners, bosses, and fellow designers. If you don't follow these tips and suggestions, at least send this video to your manager, to your product owners. I hope that it's going to help somebody out there. Otherwise, you'll find yourself and the rest of your team going in circles trying to figure out why progress is not being made. Oh, and before I forget, as promised, let me explain what the term MVP means, which is minimal viable product. This is meant to help release a digital product out into the public just with enough features that it can attract early customers and validate the product idea early on within the product development cycle. And adding the feature to a post MVP, what that means is just adding something for the future enhancements. All right, thank you so much for watching, and good luck on that next design large project. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more content like this. And I am curious to know if you like this video style with long talk, like we're having a conversation. I would love to hear from you. So don't forget to leave a comment below and let me know what you think. Your support, it means the world to me, and I genuinely appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time we talk again. All right, Enoch Madrid here signing out. Peace.